Hello again, our dear viewers. Welcome to the Live Out Your Potential podcast. We come to you with another episode, an exciting one, very interactive and insightful, thought-provoking at that. We explored and discussed one of one of the emotions that's at one point or another each and everyone go through. So on our upcoming episode, we'll be trying to understand grief. What is it? What are the different types? How do people navigate it? How do people cope with it? And today we have our guest who is Dr. Jean-Pierre Ndagijimana. I'm going to let him introduce himself.
You already introduced me.
So you tell us,
All right. I'm JPN.
like, who are you? What do you do? How are you related to Solid Minds?
Yes, thanks. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Yeah.
And as you say, my name is Jean-Pierre Ndagijimana. I go by JPN, which are my initials.
Very fun.
And I work for Solid Minds as a senior clinician. And I work mostly with youth, with university students, but also with university systems, which work with us and our partnership with the MasterCard Foundation.
Okay. Thank you for that introduction. So for today's episode, we are going to talk about grief amongst university students. So in our previous episodes, we talked about mental health, understanding mental health and wellness, and some of the self-care practices that people can adopt. And when we talk about mental health, there's a topic of grief that comes. And we thought it will be interesting to talk about it because most of the time, whenever someone hears grief, the first thing that comes to mind is death, And I personally think that we experience grief in so many ways.
Yeah.
There are a lot of things beside death that can cause a person to grieve, mostly among university students from when they graduate from high school. They go through the whole application process of getting into a certain university. They can get the admission. The admission can be denied. Now that's process of not getting into a university that you wanted to. How do you deal with that? You get into uni, you start making friends here and there. You are growing up. Your life is changing. You are meeting new people. I think there are certain things that we experience there that can be classified as grief. But I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think on one side, it's true. When it comes to death, you can't compare it with anything else.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think it makes sense. The original definitions of the concept of grief, it was conceptualized in the context of medical illnesses and dying, the death. So the original definitions then had illness and death as the center of the definition of what the grief is about.
Okay.
But it also makes sense that people would think of grief mostly when it comes to death, because it is the worst objectively of what you can grieve for. But you're right. And in order to understand that grief in a broader context, is you also kind of understand what it is.
Yeah.
It's how you process loss. Those feelings you have as a result of loss and how you process them. That's the grief. And that means, including what you said and the many other losses that we experience in our lives, they constitute grief.
So we can the bigger one is related to death, you know, when you have lost someone. But can we say in a general way, grief can be understood as whatever feeling someone has when they have lost something or someone? Could be an opportunity, could be, I don't know, friendship.
Yes.
You've lost your job.
Yes.
You have lost your source of I don't know, financial stability and things like that.
Yes.
So that can also be understood as grief. Because do you think that's when one is in university and let's say, for instance, as a student, you had planned to be on the dean's list, okay? You wanted to get straight A's and have like the top GPA. And for some reasons, you do not get it. Do like the school setting, does it allow or does it understand that that type of loss, although no one died, can really impact someone on a deeper level?
Well, yes, I wouldn't generalize and say the school system does this and doesn't do that.
In your experience for the schools that you have?
Yeah, even the schools that I'm connected with.
Yeah.
And the schools also have individuals. So they deal with those experiences differently. There's those who are definitely doing amazing work, where staff are really understanding where the students are coming from and are very supportive.
Yeah.
And for some others, there is still something to learn that would help to improve how they interact with the students. So as anyone else, as in any other systems, when it comes to mental health, we are learning. So those systems or those individuals, that's the case where they may kind of like compare, like, come on, that's a small thing. How come that you are struggling with that? Move on. That's a small thing to worry about. So yeah, it's there's so much of areas of improvement, the same as there are some wonderful things and the best practices we have been observing in the school systems.
Actually, this is hearing you speaking. It makes me think of one situation that's happened to me when I was in college. It was during exam time. So I came from my exam room. I had failed badly. I had failed, I think I was going to get a C. Now I get to my room and then I find my roommate, she was really down, like crying. And then I was concerned. I'm like, okay, what has just happened? Like panic mode. And then I got to her, I'm like, what has happened? Only for her to tell me that she has finished doing her test and out of 100, she had 98.
Now
for me, I was like, hold on. You are breaking down because you missed 2 points. And here I am, I know for sure I'm going to beg the lecturer to let me do a retest because I know I have failed. And you're here breaking down because at the end of the day, you're still getting an A. Like, what's the big deal? At that point, I think reflecting back, I failed to try to connect, with her where she was coming from. Because probably getting 100% was the goal for her. And me coming and trying to minimize whatever she was feeling at that moment was not really the best way to go about it. Because if it happens once or twice and then you realize that the people around you are not really getting where you're coming from and the feelings, although for them it may not seem that big, but for you it can really affect you, right? And then there can be consequences to that.
Yes. So, as you speak about your friend, maybe let me share with you my own story. I thought that friend was me, so I'm disappointed that
It was not
we
you.
didn't know each other at the time.
Oh.
Because that story you're saying is actually also a story of that I experienced myself.
Okay. Yeah.
Very relatable. When I was doing my master's studies, and at the time, there was I was having like a straight A plus, A plus, A plus, and I'll be emotional if I remember that experience.
It's okay.
And at that time, I was once in a group activity with my classmates.
Yeah.
And for some reasons, it was less. What the activity we did was less than A plus. That's the grade that we received as a group.
Yeah.
I cried, and I walked outside.
Oh my God. I'm
Usually,
sorry. Yeah.
I am someone. No, you don't have to say you're sorry. I want to tell you the story. Usually, in my studies, for my whole whatever studies I've had,
Yeah.
I never worried much about my grades. No.
Yeah.
I know that whether I did this grade, I get this, I was like always wanting I want to understand better this.
So the knowledge is more important than the grades.
Yeah, the knowledge was the most important thing. But something happened as a master's student.
Okay.
And as a male in the culture where male don't cry, just by having less than A plus, I cried. Okay, walked outside, and the professor came to me and said, what happened? What is going on? Right?
Because you got less than an A?
Well,
because you walked out?
That's I think she saw me down, and she walked outside. I think she had lots of reasons to walk outside and see why.
Okay.
And what I want to tell you is, you may see the friend, and you see that it was a 98, not 100%, and you're like, come on, it's just 2.
Exactly.
But in my situation, it was not just that I got, for someone from the outside world, it was that I did not get A plus. Okay?
Yeah.
But for my own, from the context of my story, it was bursting after an accumulated distress. Okay? So there were so many things that were happening in my own life.
Yeah.
At the time I was in the United States, there's so much things that were happening in my family, really heavy things that I had to process. I wasn't sleeping much at night. And when I go to school, and sometimes I would receive a call like, hey, this happened.
Yeah.
And when I go to people are going to bed, I have to receive calls or make sure that I make calls to know that the things are okay.
Yeah.
Right? And sometimes wondering, is my family telling me the truth? And that's the thing of a student at university. You're not at home, and sometimes parents or family members do not tell you the truth because they don't want you to worry and maybe mess up with your academic life.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And at the time, I was working like crazy outside being a full-time student, so that I can pay for tuition.
Yeah.
Right? And that moment when I cried, that was a trigger.
Okay.
That was a trigger for something else I had accumulated. Right? And that, for the outside world, again, you may think, less than A+ grades and you're crying, or less than 100, you have 98 and you are crying. No, you don't know. You don't know much. Okay.
The underlying issues.
And when it comes to grief, actually that is cumulative grief. Okay. When we talk about grief, there's so many types. Okay. Right? There's so many types. Okay. So sometimes then, because of people not understanding what is going on, so there were some losses that I had experienced in that journey of my academic life. And something that may appear small to the outside world, poof.
It just come to
right? And that loss was also tied to something else. For me, I wanted to do a PhD.
Okay.
Right? I wanted to do a PhD. And I wanted to make sure there is nothing that's going to stop me from being accepted in my PhD program. All right?
Yeah.
And that it kind of again triggered that fear and the concerns, and that is called anticipatory grief. Okay. So you are anticipating something, and already you are seeing the opportunities
that could have been, or that can be.
Yeah, but the loss hasn't happened yet.
You are anticipating.
But you are seeing it coming. You are anticipating it.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So for me, then the anticipation that my PhD application may not be accepted, that is anticipatory grief. Okay. When you have the students kind of starting to worry that I will not do well in my studies, that because someone else did the studies but did not get a job, so I will also not get a job. Already the brain is unable to differentiate what is real and what is anticipatory, what are you expecting. So you can start to grieve about something even if the reality has not occurred yet, but you are seeing it happen, whether it is real or it is imagined.
Perceived. Okay. Yeah. Okay, now that you've just touched into the types of grief, I think we can just delve into it, because you've talked about accumulative grief, and now you've talked about anticipatory grief. That is. Listening to you describing it, is it tied to anxiety to a certain level? Because it's being worried about something that has not yet happened. But could happen maybe because of A or B that is happening right now.
Yeah, it could be anxiety. Most of the time you may think of nervous system that is dysregulated. Okay, that is an easier way to understand. We have the nervous system that works great when it is kind of an equilibrium. And once it is dysregulated, right? Yeah. So much things can happen, right? And it is not that that situation is only kind of like irrational thoughts or no, it can be real. Someone in terms of anticipatory grief, you see someone having a terminal illness, right? And the person is still alive. But you can, it's possible, and happens.
You know how it's
people
going to
start
end.
to grieve, that process. They are seeing that. Yeah. So it doesn't mean that it can be based on facts or something imagined.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So that's why it's different from anxiety, because that anticipatory grief, it's sends me to, I don't know if you have watched this movie. Is it a movie or series? From Scratch. This guy was diagnosed with cancer, like final stage. And imagine had just gotten married. Okay. Had just gotten married, had just adopted a kid. And like his business was booming. He was a chef. And he got diagnosed. And there was no cure. So they started grieving before he even died. Yeah. So they called it celebrating his life. Like he started doing his farewell, making right with people. And Yo, I cried during that movie. I cried watching it.
Yes.
So, how many other types of grief are there?
Oh, it's actually grief is one of the worst feelings that a human can have. Again, depending on the intensity
I second
and the
that.
time it is taking.
I second that.
And it's probably one of those feelings that they have stages, they have types. It's messy.
We
Right?
are good to get to the stages. We
no,
are good to get there.
and talking about what are those types, and having those types is kind of an effort to make sure that everyone understand
What they might be
going through, because not knowing what you are going through is
it can be tough.
and things can be messier without knowing, right? So there is there is a grief that people used to call it normal grief. It is an uncomplicated grief.
Interesting.
So to mean it is an uncomplicated, it means again normal, right? Or natural grief. It is not normal. That is why I'm saying normal grief.
Yeah.
Okay, that grief, it is you are grieving for someone, your loved ones, or the material losses, or the hopes as you define them. Maybe you're planning for having these. Maybe you have this relationship, and it is just ended.
Yeah.
And it's hard to process it, right? With that, maybe you kind of process it 3 months, 6 months. Yeah, it is. The pain is still there, but you are. Yeah, you did not get lost in it. You're moving on, not because the pain you will never remember about the loss, but you can sustain your life. And the things kind of you recover, right? But there is that loss.
Yeah.
When you say then uncomplicated, it means there's something also complicated, right? You know, that situation that's again using the example of relationship. You're in a relationship today, and there's so much of things that you have created in your mind about this relationship, the scenarios, your future together.
You have seen yourself getting married.
Yes.
Naming
and
the
you're
kids.
seeing the kids, the names, the houses, that's like the vacations you will have, you grieve it.
Yeah.
And at some point, and it could take some months, but now you're seeing it's been 1 year. Now it is 3 years, it's 4 years, and now you're feeling like,
you've never moved from it.
Yes.
So that is
complicated. And that's going to be the same with that scholarship that you thought you were going to go to Harvard or to another big university. You applied. Recently had a conversation with one of the students or graduated last year. And was speaking with that person, and the person came to me and they said, I got this scholarship. Was asking for a scholarship actually. Was like, can you help me find where I can get a scholarship? I was accepted at Harvard, and I don't have a scholarship, right? And this person is one of the smartest young person that I know.
Yeah.
And that thing and where this person is coming from, the humble backgrounds, and this person has invested a lot in the future, in that saying that Harvard is saying you have been accepted, and now kind of like, you not go, right? So that can be depending on different factors. maybe that thing is going to kind of like, okay, slow down, it's gone, it's okay. But maybe 3 years, 4 years, or 5 years, person may kind of like, I will not apply for any other university
because of the shock.
because of that shock.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and there can be different factors influencing whether this person is going to be able to move on or not. That is complicated. But also there are those internalized grief. Someone you see them happy on the streets.
Every single day.
They lost their loved ones.
Yeah.
They lost the relationship. They lost the materials. The dreams they had for their life, the goals they have is like it's over. But you see them on the street, in the church, they are singing, and in the classrooms, they are kind of, the jokes, they are kind of
the
like...
mentality of it is what it is.
You see like,
Yeah.
So that inhibited. You internalize it, you keep there.
Yeah.
But also, there are those who have those experiences, and at the moment, they seem okay. No problem.
They're not reacting.
The reactions do not like, you see like, how come that these happened to this person and they seem okay, right? And they're like, no, it happens. God knows. It's God's wishes.
That's life.
It is. There's nothing I can change. That's life.
There's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
let's move on.
Accepting
Right?
life as it comes.
Yeah. That's
Internalized.
it is another one. Again, I say grief is very complicated. It could be internalized, okay, and they keep that way, and it's kind of something eating them internally, whether they know it or not, or whether they are aware of it or not.
Yeah.
But then there is also this person. Yes, that it started by being a kind of a silent grief, which also happens again, internally. But then it can be maybe months later or years later, that thing
comes back.
Yes, it was still there, and that is what's called the delayed grief. It didn't go anywhere, right? It did not go anywhere. It was still there, affecting your behavior, your relationships, affecting your physical health. But for it to burst for other people to see, that's the kind of where you kind of like the delayed grief, you start to see it. The world around you start to see it, and they may not understand why things are the way they are. Okay?
Yeah.
But there also corrective grief. When you have your classmates, something happens at your school. Something happened in your community. And there's so much of that that happened that the loss is corrective. That is also a type of grief. But there are also those grief that are traumatic, right? Which also are compared to the complicated grief. So I can go on and on and on, and it is not fun.
Yeah,
it's not fun to dive into each type of those. But I want to say here that whatever you're feeling, it doesn't have to be classified in A or B. It doesn't have to be a place to box it.
Yeah,
whatever you are experiencing, one, you're not alone. But also,
not everyone needs to understand it.
It's not that it is your weakness that you are experiencing, that you are feeling what you are feeling right now.